Namaste, London. London has always been the dream destination for high net worth individuals as well as UHNI Indians. Not only are Mayfair and Baker Street coveted spots on the Monopoly board, but are now home to many well-known Indian families. What began as a summer home hotspot is now rapidly becoming home base for members of the wealthy Indian community who are moving abroad to study in the UK, setting up businesses as well as to retire. This pre-existing trend of acquiring immovable property in the UK has only been accelerated by the pandemic and the increase in the globalization of Indian families. Let us now delve into this topic. Varsha, could you throw light on how an Indian resident can acquire real estate in the UK?
Sure. From an Indian exchange control perspective, Indian residents are permitted to remit funds under the liberalized remittance scheme to acquire immovable property abroad. They may also do so along with their non-resident relatives who may fund the acquisition through funds held in their NRO accounts or through their offshore funds. However, there are some considerations to be borne in mind if more than one person is funding such acquisition.
Absolutely. So key to note here is that if there are more than one Indian resident member funding the acquisition, all of such members need to be title holders to the property. Therefore, it is intended that the property is held only in the name of one or more such individuals. Funding needs need to be organized accordingly. In a situation where asset protection is the most important objective, what would you say is the best structure if an individual is purchasing property?
Sure. If asset protection is the concern, acquiring the immovable asset in your personal name may not be the most desirable option. There is no protection accorded from a creditor claims perspective, from a matrimonial claims perspective, or from the UK inheritance tax. There is also no protection provided from the potential reintroduction of an Indian estate duty. Hence, one may want to consider acquiring the property through some holding structures such as a UK company, an offshore company, a UK trust, or an offshore trust. However, a careful analysis of the pros and cons of each of these structures should be undertaken prior to making the final decision. Would you like to throw some light upon the applicability of UK inheritance tax?
Sure, Varsha. The UK inheritance tax would be applicable to UK real estate assets regardless of the residency or citizenship of the acquirer, subject to some limited exemptions. If the asset is held through a company, the shares of such a company would be subject to UK inheritance tax. An offshore discretionary trust, if structured carefully, would help overcome this issue. If the trust is not carefully planned and if the trust assets are attributable to a particular beneficiary, or if one of the beneficiaries of the trust is granted the right to use the home as their primary home, then the protection available to the trust assets are severely compromised. Varsha, could you throw light on if a family decides to buy assets through a corporate structure?
Sure. So, in addition to the UK inheritance tax concern which you had highlighted earlier, if UK real estate is acquired through a company, there is a corporation tax that is levied on the income earned by the company. There is also an annual tax on enveloped dwellings which is levied basis the value of the underlying UK property, as well as a 15% stamp duty that is levied at the time of acquisition. And for non-resident acquirers, there is also an additional surcharge that is levied. An offshore trust structure addresses most of these tax concerns. There is no corporation tax, there is no tax on annual tax on enveloped dwellings, there is no dividend distribution tax levied on such offshore trust structures. Instead, there is a 6% tax that is levied on every 10th anniversary of the trust.
Therefore, careful planning and structuring is needed for the key objectives of each family to be addressed. There is no one size which fits all, and hence it is important to tread with caution, as unwinding an unimplemented structure would be fraught with expenses and tax consequences. Namaste, India.